now the bar is just so high that it takes a lot of time to get quality features out the door. And there's a lot of statistics that show that the first iteration of most features never really hit home with customers. It's really important that the entire product team, that's the PMs, it's the engineers, it's the designers, talk to the customers about the features that they put out there. Engineers and designers are very, very smart, skilled people. So sometimes when they hear the pain points, they can come up with great solutions. And in some organizations, they're sort of excluded from getting that raw feedback from the customers. So there's sort of a disconnect there between solving a problem and then making sure that the customers are agreeing that this feature is actually solving their problem and not just adding confusion. Or the interesting conversation is really how to get product and engineering to work together, including design.
Hello everyone, welcome to Untrapping Product Teams, where we speak the naked truth about creating digital products. Today is a special episode in the B2B arena. We have Rasmus Makwarth. He is the founder and CEO of Bucket, a product tool specialized for product teams in the B2B area to help them create value beyond features. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Great. So Rasmus, we were talking before the show here, and you shared you've been in this area of B2B for more than 13 years. How does it feel?
That feels like a very long time when you say it out like that. But it's been fun. It's been such a journey. I mean, so much has happened in the B2B land for the past decade or so, right? So it's been fun.
Cool. Yeah, so you have founded 3 companies now, and you're still in the game, so it sounds like fun. Yeah, you want to continue doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, right? Because it's tough. It's really tough, but I guess it's also sort of addictive to you get addicted to solving problems, and that's what you do in B2B, right? You solve big problems for companies. So yeah, I enjoyed that part, but it's sometimes you go to sleep at night, you go like, why am I still doing this? Because this is so hard.
Yeah, I get that. And many people watching or listening to this episode, for sure they connect because the B2B world is quite complex. So you find many things related to the B2C, and many people are telling you, run A/B test. That's how you get evidence and you ensure your feature is right. But you go to the B2Bs, things like these, for example, they often don't apply. So I want to hear from you a few stories, like from your experience. You mentioned already it's tough, but what are some challenges you face and how did you overcome them? Very curious to hear from you.
You just mean challenges running B2B companies in general?
Yeah, I'm curious.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, first and foremost, you have to find a problem that isn't really solved in the marketplace already, right? Uh, and that's increasingly becoming hard, I would say. Like 10 years ago, it was very different. Like the maturity of the apps and the tools available to companies weren't that great, or they weren't as mature as they are now. But now, today, in 24, you could argue that almost all problems in B2B land can be solved some way or another with the existing tools out there. But of course, you can always improve and do better. But I think to your point, or to your question, finding the problem that is still sort of at scale, happening over and over, that is out there and isn't really solved, I think is the hardest thing to figure out right now. It helps a lot if you felt that pain, because then you really are your first customer, right? And that goes a long way in terms of nailing that positioning, problem solution problem that we're talking about. So that's the first you need to solve.
So finding the right problem that is worth solving at a scale, and if you have the pain, it's even better. But when you go to the B2B world, one of the challenges is how do you validate the product market fit?
Right, exactly. Well, I think ideally you have an idea about the problem already existing because you're one of the people feeling the pain already, right? Like I think it's so good to be solving a particular problem for yourself as a founder. I think that just makes things so much easier. It's very, very hard to sort of imagine what other people are feeling as pain points and then try to solve them if they're not your own pain points, right?
Mhm.
So there's some validation in that. Like you felt a problem over and over again, and nobody has really addressed it. That's the first step in the right direction. But then, of course, you want to chat to a lot of other people and ask them uh, questions in that direction to see if those pain points come up in their jobs too. And then, lastly, you want to see what the marketplace looks like. Like, are other tools, incumbents, products out there close to solving this problem, or are they still quite far and there's sort of room and a wedge for you to sort of slide into with your new product?
Interesting. Yeah. So it's about understanding the market, how they solve the solution, and what you can do differently. So once you have this understanding, you can find something to do. But when it goes to the getting things done in the B2B world, one of the challenge is like we ship a feature. What do we do next? And how do we ensure what we did actually makes sense? So I think this is one of the challenge many people face. I'm curious, how do you see that in the world now?
Yeah, yeah. Shipping features is interesting, right? Because you have this whole uh, a huge amount of work that goes into coming up with a feature roadmap or a product roadmap. Like you talk to customers, like we just discussed, you figure out what their pain points are, you figure out what sort of features your product needs that addresses those pain points.
Hmm.
And that all takes a lot of work, right? You need to talk to customers, you need to design those features, you need to spec them out, you need to implement them in terms of engineering, and then you need to ship them. And that whole process is a lot of work. And it takes a ton to get a feature out that has a high quality bar. And that is needed these days, right? You talked about 10 years ago, maybe you could ship features a little bit faster and you would be okay. But now the bar is just so high that it takes a lot of time to get quality features out the door. Um, Once they're out the door, teams should really be then talking to customers and evaluating if those features were really solving the pain points that they were setting out to do. But you've just climbed this huge mountain of building these features as a team, right? And sometimes the easiest thing, or just because you need a breather, is to sort of take your attention elsewhere, maybe to the next backlog item or to the next problem, because hey, you've shipped that feature. Maybe it solved the pain points of your customers just fine. Maybe it's all good. We see that a lot, right? Teams, they sort of emoji celebrate when they ship a feature. They mark the project as done on Linear, and that's sort of the end of the road. And you feel good about it. You got it out the door, and you should celebrate. But the truth is just that there's a long cycle afterwards where you need to talk to customers repeatedly to figure out if those features actually help them, because sometimes they don't. And there's a lot of statistics that show that the first iteration of most features never really hit home with customers, either because it's too confusing, they're not aware that it exists, they don't know how to set it up or whatever, right? um, but that's a lot of work, and sometimes that gets forgotten a little bit because hey, maybe the feature was good enough, we got it out there, so let's just hope for the best and move on to the next interesting thing, right?
Yeah, and that's the part you are touching. There are two things here that I want to explore further. You said that the teams should talk to customer. And in many places, they understand that the PM should talk to customer. And now you mentioned the team. So let's dig into this a little bit. How do you see the advantage of the team talking? How do you see work in real life?
Yeah, 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 you're totally right. I think it's really important that the entire product team, that's the PMs, it's the engineers, it's the designers, talk to the customers about the features that they put out there. Other people should probably talk to customers as well, customer success, support, account executives, and sales. Like you have a lot of touch points with customers, but it's just so critical that things don't get lost in translation when it comes to the experience the customers have and the pain points they have with the particular part of the product. And then the product teams who are working on these features, in the other end. There needs to be like a really close feedback loop between those two. And it also ensures that features don't get dropped for a long, long time, in the sense that once you have something out the door, you've just shipped a new feature, it's fresh, right? Everybody knows what everything is about that feature. And if you don't get feedback rapidly after such a release, the product team will get scattered and go work on other features. And then when the feedback finally flows back to them 4 months later, again, they will be working on very different things. Will have forgotten everything about it, and momentum is sort of lost. So when I said teams before, I meant that it's important that the entire team that worked on the feature, get the customer feedback really fast so they can quickly go and iterate on that feature. And sometimes it's just a small tweak. Sometimes it's like a week worth of design work or product work or engineering work that goes a long, long way for the end customers, right? But you have to do it fast. And you don't really want to have a bottleneck or a single person that then has to translate all that feedback down to the team. Engineers and designers are very, very smart, skilled people. So sometimes when they hear the pain points, they can come up with great solutions. And in some organizations, they're sort of excluded from getting that raw feedback from the customers. There's a lot of other levels to this that I can get into, but that's why it's at teams.
Yeah, and I connect to this because of a few things: momentum, accountability, and avoiding the bottleneck. It's a teamwork. There is not a one person shining and ensuring everything is right. So those solving the problem need to learn if the problem is actually being solved the way it is supposed to. And the other point I said I wanted to connect to is you mentioned that to create a B2B product, you need to feel the pain, and then you need to start creating something that is scalable and so on. You, ju- you just created a new product. So I want to hear, like, what is the pain that Bucket is solving?
Yeah, it's very much tied to what we just discussed, that a product team, again, designers, engineers, and PMs, are working on a feature for quite some time based off of some customer feedback, or they have a hunch that a certain feature will help customers and deliver value. When that feature is done today, it typically means that it's done from an implementation point of view. Like the workflow that we've created in our industry over the past 10 years is really good pre-deployment. So that means you go to Figma or you go to Notion, write up the specification, you design the feature, you have integration into Linear or Jira, where you can then take those designs and implement it. And you can then run tests and have a pipeline for deploying the feature once it's done from an implementation point of view. And then the workflow stops, right? You've just marked your feature as completed or done in Jira, for instance. But that's actually the exact time when it's deployed. And that's, objectively speaking, the most critical time in the life cycle of a new feature, because now the customers are seeing the feature for the very first time. Like, they've never seen the feature before. Now it's there in the product. And the team has sort of just marked the project as done. So there's sort of a disconnect there between solving a problem and then making sure that the customers are agreeing that this feature is actually solving their problem, and not just adding confusion or bloat or whatever it might be to the product that they're customers of. What we really believe is that there's an extra step needed in terms of that whole workflow, and that's the customer feature evaluation step. And it's both, there's many layers to it, right? There's both the quantitative, in terms of, are features even getting adopted? Do customers even know about it? Are they engaged? Do they stay retained? But also just the qualitative aspect, like, what do they actually think of this? Like, maybe they keep trying it, so it looks good from a metric point of view, but they actually also keep getting annoyed by it because they have to use it, because that's what the product forces them to do, but they don't like to use it. That's such an important nuance to get into those metrics, because otherwise it just looks like you have good retention metrics. So there's lots of input that you want to get from the customers. But today, as I said before, the workflow stops just when all of this starts to happen, when the customers interact with the feature for the very first time. What Bucket is trying to do is gather all of those, all that customer intel automatically, and then serve it back to the entire product team as fast as possible. And that means we're super focused on the first 0 to 12 weeks of a feature lifecycle in deployment, like once it's released. And that's when the teams still have the feature fresh in memory. And that's when all of the feedback will make the most sense. And that's also when you can make the most, you know, uh, positive outcomes in terms of customers reporting bugs or dissatisfaction. Like if you hear that fast and if you act on it and iterate, you will turn dissatisfied customers into very, very happy customers, right? Mm-hmm. But if they have to wait 4 months and the team is scattered and elsewhere, then those improvements to a feature might just become, back of the backlog. So long story short, there's the whole release, review, and then iterate agile workflow that I think we've all sort of talked about in good ways for a long, long time, but never really gotten into doing. And there are tons of reasons for it. What we can discuss that as well. But what Bucket is trying to solve is to make sure that those features we ship actually also land nicely with customers. And if not, then we can fix it fast.
Mm-hmm. So if I try summarizing, what you're trying to do is to equip product teams to deliver outcomes beyond outputs, because the feature is not the end. You deploy, don't jump to the next. You understand what is the result and react fast. So that's what Bucket is striving to do.
Exactly. And I think, outcome over output has been sort of said a lot over the past few years in our industry. But one thing is saying it, another thing is doing it. And it actually it requires a lot of tooling and a lot of eyeballs and a lot of work to do this post-release evaluation efficiently and repeatedly. And I think, therefore, in a lot of organizations, it either doesn't happen or it happens differently in each team, or maybe the data analyst or other peoples that could be used, I think, better are used for this kind of feature evaluation. But it can all be quite automated, and it should really, just like the rest of the workflow pre-deployment. Like when you merge some code, you get like the CI/CD system to see if the syntax of the code passes or if there's if it fails, right? That happens automatically whenever you push some code to GitHub. We want to mimic the same behavior. Like when you ship a feature to your customers, you get some feedback rapidly back from them. And I think that is really what will drive outcome driven teams that really are focused on not just output but customer satisfaction. And I think it's transformative from a R&D point of view over time, that you're so fast in working and moving to work on the features that matter to customers and not work on features that are less important.
That's great. And one thing, I agree with you when it comes to outcome over output. It's a lot said about it, but when it comes to the daily doing, that's another story. And we are talking here specifically about the B2B. And one thing that I want to ask you, it's a tricky question because our people listening or watching, they may have in mind, hey, I already have analytics. I have Google Analytics here. I have Mixpanel. So why do I need another tool? Or is it a tool replacing? How does it change my day? How does it equip me? So that's something people may wonder, and I would like to get your take on it.
Yeah. No, it's a great question. So we are in the feature management category, product category, which is typically where you have feature flagging. So that could be LaunchDarkly or similar tools, typically owned by engineering, and typically they're used to roll out features safely, meaning that you can roll out a feature to, let's say, 10% or 100% of your customer base, but you can then turn it off rapidly if something goes wrong, right? Which is nice. It gives you a confidence boost in shipping early and fast because you can always revert. But we just think it doesn't stop there. Like we would love for you to be able to roll out your feature to, let's say, 20% of your customer base, and then ask them, like, how do you think this feature solves a particular problem, the problem that it was designed to solve, right? And you want to ask them at the right time. You want to get some engagement metrics from those customers. And if it all looks great, you can roll it out to 100% in bucket. But if there's some dissatisfaction, if there's some confusion, if there's some bad feedback, you now have a chance to fix it before you roll it out to 100%. So we really truly believe that getting customer feedback should be part of the whole rollout phase. Like a successful rollout isn't when you hit 100%, it's when the customers are happy with the feature, right? And it's not a data problem to your question. Like if you have product analytics, if you have ways of surveying customers, you could potentially build this yourself and hook it up with your feature flagging service. But we really see it as solving two different use cases. Like what we're doing is really solving the initial feedback at the feature level. Like we've just released this new button that does this functionality. You can export CSV now in your product. You know, how do you like the modal that takes you through exporting the data through a CSV file to a CSV file, for instance, just as an example. If you ship that feature, you need to know that people can actually achieve what they need to achieve with that feature. And I think that's a leading indicator. Like leading indicators is that this looks like people are adopting it, they're finding it, they're giving thumbs up, they're giving a good CSAT score, and the qualitative feedback looks good. Those are a bunch of leading indicators that product teams can really work with because they work in the scope of a feature. Product analytics, as you can almost hear in the name, is about product level metrics. Like what's our monthly active users over time? How many customers do we have? What's our revenue? Which subscriptions are people on, and so forth. And over time, over a long time, you can tie key features to revenue potentially, or you can at least try to correlate those two. And that I think product and data analyst and product analytics is great for, and you should absolutely have those capabilities in your B2B company. But it's not really for the product teams. They can't affect the monthly active users by working on a CSV export functionality. But that might be a very, very important paid tier feature for your product going forward. So we just truly believe that if every product team is given the right tools to deliver as great functionality to your product, and they can act on dissatisfaction fast, then the product metrics over time will greatly take care of themselves. But we can't have this lag. We can't go back after 9 months and go like, hey, wait a minute. All these features that we did over the past year, they haven't really affected our monthly active users or top line in any meaningful way. I wonder why that is. And then you go into an investigation. We would love to have those leading indicators to product teams as fast as possible. And then the product analytics and Stripe subscription dashboards and whatnot, they are used for more lagging indicators, product level analysis. And you should definitely have that. We just believe that rolling out a feature doesn't end with, it doesn't break the code. It ends with the customers are happy with the feature.
For me, it is a quite smart move. So you are not competing with the analytics. And I understand what you say. Many teams have different dashboards. And it can mean that they don't use it, or it can mean that it's very far from reality. There are many dashboards saying how your conversion rate is doing, how you're driving revenue. But the challenge, as you named here, and we are trying to solve as well all the time, is how do I connect what I'm doing today, this feature release, to the big thing? So you need to have the lead indicators. So I see you positioning in the feature management, and that is about closing the gap between driving value and just kind of you ship a feature and you jump to the next. And in this case, if you jump to the next, you are relying on luck. If the feature was right, which is often not the case for the first iteration, but if it was right, good, everyone is happy. But if you realize 9 months later, you won't be able to connect the dots, as you mentioned. So what you are driving seems quite interesting for product teams, and very, very important for everyone listening here. It's not only product managers. What Rasmus is trying to do with Bucket is equipping teams to receive feedback fast. So you can use momentum, make that tweak. You understand that something is not working. So the adoption is not working. That's the first thing. But why is it not working? Are customers finding it, or they find confusing? So the earlier you get this feedback, the sooner you can react. And the very first moments of putting the feature line are critical. So what I wonder now is like, do you have already some stories of using Bucket to share? I would be very curious about it.
Yeah, I have. And if I may just add just one thing to what we talked about before in terms of the feature management category. Whenever a product team is rolling out a feature that is feature flagged, it means that you have to add a feature flag key to your code base. It's
Yep.
like it's just the way you do it today, right? And with Bucket, it's the same. We just add the evaluation into that snippet so that you're basically informing us about feature engagement with that exact same snippet. So my point is, we're not adding to your workload. You're doing the exact same. We're just giving you the evaluation and qualitative feedback automatically as part of the exact same code snippet. In terms of success stories of Bucket, yeah, there's a few. Like myself in before Bucket, I was really struggling to get teams to repeatedly look into these evaluation data points after shipping a feature. I was trying to get teams to talk to 25 customers, create a feature dashboard, summarize it all into a report, and then sort of decide if they needed to iterate or if the feature was sort of good enough for now, right? Those are basically the two options you have for most features. Like, is this good enough for now, or do we need to work on it again? Like, do we need to iterate right now, or is it good enough for now? And sometimes it worked for a little while, but then it sort of stopped working really fast, and it just kept happening in all teams. And there are few different reasons for it, I think. One is you can't evaluate a feature by just doing a simple data lookup. It's a continuous effort that you have to do week after week after week. So you sort of have to do that while also working on the next backlog items, which is just asking a lot. And then there's the second part, which is like, how do you do this consistently? Like, some people are dashboarding in one way and some other people are dashboarding in another way. And are they talking to the same customers? But they shouldn't really, because now we're overloading the customers. There are a lot of things that sort of can go bad here. And if the dashboards aren't based off of the same underlying definitions, then as their manager, I can't compare them even, right? Because I don't trust that the data is based off of the same definitions of what an active customer is or whatever it might be, right? These inconsistencies we've seen from our customers as well. Like, they've brought them up multiple times. So in Bucket, there is a framework. It's called STARS, and it helps give you baseline engagement metrics, and combining the quantitative engagement metrics with the qualitative CSAT scores that we gather automatically from your customers into a feature funnel, a feature success funnel, if you like. And in terms of success stories, we've been told that this funnel gives a baseline that is, in most cases, enough to make a really quick decision. Like, there's fundamentally something wrong here, and you can tell really fast as a team, like if the adoption is just tanking or the retention is tanking or the CSAT scores are tanking. So that framework in itself gives a baseline that is much better than what we have today. But even better, anyone can join the company and understand exactly how that stars funnel works, because it's very simple. It has like a target audience, who's the feature for. In that audience, how many have tried it, how many have adopted the feature, how many are retained, and then lastly, how many are satisfied. And it's like 5 simple steps, and Bucket is built around those 5 steps. And it makes it so easy for all product teams to at least have a baseline that is consistent per feature. Then if you want to go deeper and ask certain questions, of course, there's a use case for that, for sure. But what we're talking about is making sure that everybody is at least following up on the features that they release, and they don't need to go through like a 5 hour educational process in the company to be able to do so. Um, so that's a success story from a CPO that was really into getting like a consistent baseline across the entire company. Uh, then there is the CTOs on Bucket that are using feature flagging services today, but have a feeling that there is a lack of feedback from product. So they ship out a lot of features. Engineers are asking for, basic engagement and satisfaction uh, feedback from customers, but they aren't really getting any. And typically, it's just because PMs are just insanely busy. I've been a PM. You are very, very busy, and you're spread very, very thin. And also, PMs are very different in terms of how they work. Like some are very data driven, some are more sales driven, some are more product driven. It's like very different types of personas in that role. So this was a way to make sure that the product teams were getting feedback quickly without having to ask someone, because you don't want to nudge a PM who is very, very busy all the time for data. You want to be able to do it yourself if it's right there in your feature flagging tool, right? And it also solves a purpose part of the engineering job. Like it's very, very hard for an engineer over time to be sitting at the end of a waterfall just shipping out features without ever really hearing how's it going, am I making people's lives easier with the work that I'm doing. That can be a bit of a downer after some time, right? You want to make sure that you have impact and you do something meaningful. So this is a way of making sure that the engineers and the designers get this feedback. And then lastly, there's also an interesting conversation between product and engineering happening when engineering also have insights into the engagement metrics, because they can then push back on features that are getting an upgrade, or at least are scheduled to get an upgrade, but have very low engagement and a very high maintenance cost. So the maintenance cost of a feature is something that is oftentimes quite uh, hidden to a PM. And you want to have a conversation where both the input to make an improvement for a feature and the maintenance cost and the customer engagement all make sense together, right? But you need those three parameters at least to make an informed decision. So I think that's another case of product and engineering sort of working together, coming together, which I've seen Bucket help with.
Really like the stories you shared for a few reasons. I will make some comment here. First thing is, when you shared the CPO struggled to consolidate, to have standardized, streamline. I can connect to this very much, because if you have all the time to ask for this, it means for the PMs and the others, it is work they have to do. And PMs are already stretched too thin, so they will be reluctant to do it. And what Bucket is doing in this case is simplifying. So you make simple to collect the data and understand how the feature is evolving. So you remove the friction of deciding how you're going to measure. You're already using the star concept, and then it is there. You just need to use it. So you go there, and so on, you have a starting point to collect the value. And this is very important because the longer it takes for you to learn, the more dangerous the feature becomes, because then you're just having that in the product, and just having a feature in the product without knowing if it adds values, actually you will run the risk of detracting value, because it may confuse people and so on. So I like this positioning and simplifying, because what I see Bucket doing now in this case, it is about simplifying the understanding of success. Are we being successful in what we create? And the other aspect is removing the silo, because everyone works in a product team, but sometimes there are the hidden walls. So engineers implement solutions, design solutions, and product managers decide which solution to do. And that's not what anyone wants. I say a lot that software engineers actually solve problems. So how do you help them know if they are solving problems? Because many people ask me like, hey, I struggle to get software engineers to go beyond coders. Well, one of the things is about the tooling. Help them see the result of their work, because these people are quite smart. They want to ensure that their work has some value in the others' lives. And if there's not, so what they can do to change it. So they want to know that. So the position is very interesting, and the stories look very promising.
Yeah, I've been I've been a bottleneck myself. Like I've had uh, in my time at Elastic, which acquired my previous company. I was speaking to very large customers, and I was sometimes bringing engineers into those conversations so that they could, see firsthand what was going on and hear like how the customers described what they were using the software for. Um, and then sometimes you would see the customer go like, yeah, then I click here, then I click here, then I wait 10 seconds, then I click here, then I click here. And then they get to explain about something in the product that they don't like. But then after the meeting, the engineers would tell me like, wait, are they waiting 10 seconds and clicking 6 times every day to get this thing done? And that wasn't even the point of the meeting, right? It was just something that never it wasn't never clear to the engineers that that's actually what the customers are going through. And then it took 2 days, and then it was 2 clicks instead of five, right? Because an engineer can go to work on that and fix it, and they're motivated to fix it because they want to fix that annoyance and that pain point, but they just weren't aware. Like there was just no way for them to see exactly how the customers were using the product. And again, it's not a tooling problem per se, or I mean, it is a tooling problem, but it's not a data problem. It's more like uh, a feedback mechanism problem, right? Like, how do we make sure that the engineers and designers are getting this information as fast as possible? It's probably out there in most companies. They probably have tools that can gather many of these data points, but it's scattered in maybe 3 or 4 different tools. And who takes the time to sort of put it all together and into a report and then feed it back to the product teams? So that's really what we're solving more than anything. But I think it's just so transformative. And I think the engineering example that I just gave before sort of illustrates what can happen if you actually show engineers and designers that what you did was fine, but it's 5, 6 clicks and 10-second wait. Like we can do better. And they go like, oh yeah, we can do better. And they take pride in that too, right? So of course they want to do better. So I think it's a win-win where when you just present it to them.
Yeah, it was a lovely example. It relates to one of the principles I like using. It is help the others see what you see. So you see, for example, there's a problem as a product manager or someone is seeing there's a problem. But if you tell the problem to somebody else, it's weak. It weakens the problem. But if you show them and they make the conclusions themselves, they simply want to solve it.
Yeah,
Engineers are smart. They don't want to see their work like, hey, seriously, this is my work. They take pride on that. They say, let me make it better.
yeah. It was embarrassing in that example I just gave before. The problem the customer was showing wasn't actually the 5 click and the 10-second wait. It was what happened at the end of it. But the engineer still caught it. Like, wait, is that five clicks and 10 seconds? Like they saw a problem that I maybe had seen so many times that I sort of forgot about it or weren't really thinking could get faster. Because what am I to say in terms of how can we speed that up from a code or database perspective, right? But the engineers will sometimes think of great solutions to those problems that PMs can. And that's totally cool. Like they come from two different areas, and the same with designers. So you really want all eyes on the feedback.
Sure. That's the power of perspectives.
Yep, exactly.
Cool. We're coming to the end of the episode today. It has been a lot of knowledge, but I want to ask you, do you have any final thoughts you want to leave to those watching?
Any final thoughts? That's a good question. Um, Well, I think the interesting conversation is really how to get product and engineering to work together, including design, because I see a lot of division in a lot of organizations where you have sort of product throwing features over the fence to engineering. But I really, really do believe that most successful companies, they work well together in those departments. Like uh, it shouldn't be about squeezing more output out of engineering. It should be making better outcomes and making more customers happy. And I think you really need to work closely together between design, engineering, and product to make that happen. But we just have like org charts and tools that are selling to each department in isolation, and I think that's part of the problem. So we are sort of trying to squeeze ourselves into the middle there because we're in the engineering category historically with feature flagging, but we're taking a lot of customer feedback and putting it into that category as sort of a Trojan horse. But I think, yeah, I think that's needed, of course.
Great final thoughts. It is about breaking down the walls and striving for collaboration. This is very important. We can succeed if we collaborate, so we need the perspective of everyone. And for those watching, keep in mind it is not about squeezing output. It's how do you figure out to drive outcome. Awesome. So Rasmus, how can people connect to you?
Well, on X, Makwarth is my last name. That's also my handle over there. And I'm at Rasmus at bucket.co. And Bucket is on bucket.co. So go check it out.
Awesome. I will leave all the links here and all the address. So for those who want to know more about Bucket, just check it out and hopefully it will help you understand what works fast enough and what doesn't so you can adapt it. So thanks everyone for watching and let's rock it together.